Hey everyone, how's it going? Today we're going to be covering how to get to gold. Now, my target audience for this video are of course top laners below that rank, hoping to make that next step and make it there. And my intention behind this guide is to really simplify and create a clear process for you that's going to help you reach that rank. But before we begin, I do want to clearly state, in general, I really hate smurfing content. I don't think it's very useful, a challenger player playing in lower elo games, just stomping their opponent and even explaining what they're doing. It's really hard for a lower elo player to replicate that because there are so many things that the challenger player is doing that they're not talking about. They're anticipating every spell that's going to happen. They're baiting spells, tracking jungle. There are so many little things that they're doing that you can't just watch and replicate even with a basic explanation. So I'm going to be breaking down the important steps and creating a process that's going to help you actually see results. Now, I do want to say the reason I'm making this guide right now is because recently I did move to Korea, and because you can't transfer accounts over to here, I had to start from scratch. I had to level up an account, I had to rank it up, but because the account was extremely old, even though I had to level it up, I had to start an Iron. I think it's an MMR bug, I don't really know the reason, but I 5-0'd placement starting an Iron, so I had to play through every single elo bracket, so I thought I'd at least make content of it. I'm going to be covering a lot of different brackets, but I'm really going to be trying to break down, show some examples, but I'm not really going to go through full games of me dropping 25 kills on Jax and talking through it. I'm going to be breaking down my learnings on this journey, hopefully and share it with you, and hopefully that's going to help you on your journey. Hey everyone, if you're passionate about improving and leveling up your gameplay, I've been offering coaching classes for 5 days a week for quite some time, and just seen firsthand how much my students have been improving across all different elo brackets. How it works is you'll come to a class with a VOD like reviewed, and I'm going to help you with your early game, your mid game, or anything you feel like needs improving. And if you're unsure, then I'm going to steer you in the right direction by setting clear learning objectives. Link's going to be in the description, I hope to see you there, but if not, then enjoy the video. The first topic we're going to be covering is going to be your champion pool. Now, what I strongly recommend if you're serious about climbing and improving at the game is that you really limit your champion pool and pre-plan the 1 to 2 champions that you're going to be playing on your journey. Now, you could have a third champion there if you've been playing League for a very long time. If you feel like your pool's quite big, you can limit it to 3, but only use your third champion as a counter pick. So, for example, let's say your pool is Trundle and Mordekaiser. Those are the champs you're choosing to play, and you're putting a lot of time into them, but every time you verse Jax, regardless of the champ you play, you just get destroyed. You really hate that matchup, and you feel like even when you play well and go even, it still feels bad later on. If that's the case, you can have a simple counter prepared, like a champion like Malphite, for example. We just poke him down and neutralize. That can be okay, but generally I would advise against that. I would keep your pool to around 1 to 2, but there are outliers where you could have 3. Now, your goal with keeping your pool 1 to 2 is to build as much champion mastery as possible. Champion mastery is one of the most important points of this game, and if you can get relatively high champion mastery on your champion to the point where you can pilot them and execute your spells and abilities without having to think too hard about it, you don't need to think about which order you're doing them or playing around your cooldowns, it just comes naturally to you, then you're going to be in a really good spot to free up your mind to think about other aspects of the game. You can think about, your trading patterns, your warding, stuff like that. Anything else you need to think about will be freed up. But if you're just playing a champion that you're not that comfortable on, or if you're playing a difficult champion, you're going to have to put a lot of brain power into using their spells correctly, that it's going to make your journey a lot harder. Now, there are 3 main categories I want you to keep in mind when selecting your champion pool, and the most important by far is ease of execution. You don't want to be making your rank journey below gold way harder than it needs to be by selecting champions that are very difficult to master. So for example, you don't want to be letting champs like Fiora or Irelia or Riven, which take hundreds of games to master, because not only is it going to take you way longer to see results, but it's also going to slow down your overall growth as a player. Now what I mean by that, let's say you play 100 games of Fiora and 100 games of Garen. The mistakes you make on Garen past 10 or 20 games, most of them are actually going to be game specific, your understanding of the game and your decision making. Maybe you should have warded, maybe you missed a back timer, maybe you traded at a bad time. Most of the mistakes you make on this champion, once you've really figured out his kit and you get them to a good level, are going to be gameplay related mistakes, not so much champion mastery related mistakes. Now don't get me wrong, you can always optimize your champion mastery and your spells better, even in Challenger, even 1-tricks, can use their champ better, but the majority of your mistakes if you try to play a champ like Aurelia or Riven or Fiora are going to be champ related. You're going to mess up your comboing, you're going to have to be thinking a lot about your spells, you're not really going to have room to improve at your fundamental understanding of the game. And the other points to keep in mind before you decide on your champion is self-sufficient champions are always going to be better in below gold games. And what I mean by that are champions that you don't need to rely on your teammates' performance to be relevant in that game. So for example, let's say you're playing Kayle. You play Kayle every single game. If you play a game where you verse Jax, Elise, Renekton, Talia, stuff like that, Rek'Sai, Set or something, you're probably going to get punished. They're going to look to dive you, the wave might come back, they can gank you very easily. There's going to be timers where you probably need help from your jungler. It's not ideal to be playing champions like that in the long run, it's going to feel quite inconsistent for you. But if you play a self-sufficient champ, so for example, you're playing Dr. Mundo, even if the enemy jungler wants to gank top and you're in a hard matchup, even if your jungler disconnects from the game, he's not even playing, you're probably going to be fine. You're self-sufficient. You can farm from far away. If they try to block the creeps, they'll take enough damage. Worst case, you might be down 15 or 20 CS, but you're still going to be relevant in that game because your champion's very self-sufficient. You don't rely on your teammates' performance at all to do your role in that game. And for our final point, and this kind of ties into ease of execution, but champions with clear win conditions in the game. So for example, out of our list Trundle, the way you win the game on Trundle, most of the time, is very clear. You're going to win the game through split pushing. You're going to run down side, you're going to break as many towers as you can, kill people 1v1 if they're disrespecting, eat camps, and just grow as big as possible, and you don't really need to bring that lead to the rest of the map. You can just run down side, create pressure, and of course, there's ways you can optimize and improve upon his win condition. You know, not dying, when to eat camps, when to respect, stuff like that. But that's going to be a lot easier for you to improve on that specific win condition because, of course, your champion pool should be low at this point and you're building muscle memory onto him and champion mastery. But also, you know the way to win the game. It's not going to be changing very frequently. Of course, there are going to be times on Trundle when you should group. Maybe you should rock up to this Baron and win because your whole team's doing well, instead of running straight down side when, you know, the wave's not even pushed out yet. Of course, there are going to be times like that, but the majority of the time, you're winning the game through going through side and creating pressure and winning that way. So it's going to be very consistent for you, and going from, you know, level 1 to breaking Nexus is going to be a very clear pathway. And for another example, we have Malphite on our list. You're probably going to be looking to poke down your lane opponent with Qs, ult them when they're low HP, maybe even ult them with your jungler, get some kills, and then roam around the map looking for picks, trying to engage on their own mobile backline, trying to kill the control mage or the AD carry, and engage the fight like that. The win condition's very clear on this champion as well. Whereas a champion like Aatrox, you have a lot of options. You can play side lane, you can create pressure, you can power farm camps, you can be a bit of a Zayu style, or you can look to push in the wave, fog down mid, attack them on mid wave, arrive to dragon early. There's a lot of macro that goes into harder champions to play, champions with harder win conditions, where if you play champs like Yorick and Trundle and even Malphite, the win condition is very clear, so you're going to be able to improve upon that win condition, but also other aspects of your gameplay as well, and without too much hassle. Now, I've made a bit of a template that hopefully will help you with your selection process on what champions to pick, and I've really nailed down the categories that I really value on champions in this ELO bracket. Now, I'll run you through each category and why I value it so highly. So first of all, ease of execution. We already talked about that, so I'll move straight on to early game combat power. The reason this is so important, especially in below gold games, is straight up the majority of people you verse are going to be very weak in lane. They're not really going to understand who's stronger at certain points of the lane, and if you have early game combat power, if you're stronger than them, you're going to have a lot more avenue to play for kills and snowball and win that way. So for example, let's say you're playing Set, and you have Conqueror, Ignite, Bone Plating, right? Maximum power. Most champs that walk up to you, you can just beat to death level 1. They're not going to respect you, or you're going to get level 2. While they're still level 1, you can all in them then. You're going to have a lot of room to snowball, and we're going to cover exactly how in the laning section of the guide. But generally, champions with a lot of early game power are going to be very favored in this elo bracket. So for example, if you're the one playing Malphite, down lower on the list, and you have come up against a Darius or an Ignite Set, he's just going to beat your head in level 1. And even if you play well and respect and give some CS, that's of course not as easy and clear as a win condition as just being very proactive and dominating somebody in lane, and also you're not going to improve as much in the long run. Because if you're playing more proactive and trying to snowball through your lane and really taking punishing trades and you're the one leading the lane, how it's going, how the lane's going, you're going to improve a lot more than if you're just reacting to what your opponent is doing because you feel like your champion is weaker. Now, as for side lane power, the reason I have this here is because it is the easiest win condition in this elo bracket. You can have a much better time and more consistency, winning your game through being strong inside and dominating your opponent, drawing people to you, and mastering that type of 1v2 skirmish situation, breaking towers when they're not there, and having that as your win condition, compared to the opposite, where let's say you're grouping up, maybe you're playing a bruiser, trying to group up with your team around Dragon for 5v5s, doing a random fight around mid where your AD carry gets caught. There's so much variance to the game if you play in that style, especially in an elo bracket, where the majority of your players are not going to have a clear idea of how to play the game. They're going to mess up the team fights, the rotations, someone might not even be at the dragon, where if you're playing through side and playing more of an isolated style, it doesn't really matter what your team does at all. They can go and die at dragon, and it sounds pretty mean, but if they go and fight dragon and a couple of them die, and you get top tier 2, get Krugs, get red buff, get really strong, and come back and do the same thing to bot, you're going to be able to carry the game regardless, where if you play a champion like Aatrox, Good example, he's a pretty hard champion that I advise against in this elo bracket, and you rock up to a dragon fight and your AD carry just gets caught before you get there. It's like, okay, what do I do now? What is my win condition in this game? And below gold, that situation is going to be a lot more consistent. Now, to summarize why I made this chart for you guys, I wanted to provide you with a visual aid that'll help you with selecting your champion. Now, if you already know what champions you want to play, that's great, you don't need to worry about it, but if you're still on the fence and not sure what champions to play, look at the categories above. You should be following ease of execution no matter what, but look at the categories and see what you value. Do you value side lane power really highly, being able to farm well, early game combat power, and try to find a champion that works best for what you value in the game and what kind of playstyle you prefer. And I'd also like to specify, don't feel like you can only play one of these 9 champions I'm recommending and nothing else is going to work. This is what I recommend for the majority of the player base below gold or an unranked that are hoping to take their improvement seriously and see results. If you learn the game, on one of these champions I'm recommending, it's going to be a lot of an easier journey. You're going to improve at other aspects of the game a lot quicker than if you're playing different champs, but I don't know your individual league journey. If you're someone that's got, let's say, 200 games of Pantheon, you love that champ so much, you watch a lot of VODs onto him, that's fine. I'm not saying completely give up that champion forever. I'm recommending learning the game and improving on one of these ease of execution champions, but still keep the champs you love in your back pocket. You can pick them up later on when you feel like you've seen more results and you've improved in other aspects of your game. But if you do have a lot of games on a certain champion and you're not seeing results in ranked, you are lacking in other aspects of your gameplay, and this guide can of course help with that, but learning those aspects on one of these champions I'm recommending, it's going to make your journey a lot easier. Up next, we're going to be covering mentality and mindset. Now, because I've had quite a few students now below the rank of gold, every time I ask them questions about why they make certain mistakes, a lot of their answers are almost identical because they're all having similar experiences. Now, to give an example of that, if I ask, why did you leash in this matchup? The matchup's really volatile, you want to be playing aggressive level 1. They will answer, if I don't leash, my jungler's going to get tilted, he might flame me, he's probably going to run it down, so I have to leash him. Now, in my experience, I just made that recent climb. Out of all the games I played, I did not leash a single game. It didn't matter my matchup, it didn't matter what champion my jungler was playing. I didn't leash. I had chat disabled, and the performance between my jungler and the enemy jungler was almost identical. It didn't make a difference for me. Of course, I'm not saying they played the exact same every game, but the outcome of how they played in that game didn't change based on if they received a leash or not. They might feel worse, they might be a bit more tilted, but it doesn't really change how the game's going to go. But you starting in lane and really learning how to have a strong laning phase, and we'll touch on that later on, and the laning section is going to be exponentially more important than keeping your jungler happy, because if he tilts from you not leashing him, he's probably going to tilt from something else in the game. Maybe he ganks bot, and his Alistar fails a combo, he might get tilted then. So trying the whole game not to let your jungler tilt is not going to be a reliable strategy. It's better to focus on purely what's in your control, and starting in lane and playing the lane to the best of your ability is going to be in your control every single game that you play. Now, I did just briefly touch on playing this game with no chat on, but I want to make it extremely clear. There is no good reason whatsoever to play League with chat enabled. Pings are going to be more than enough every single time. Now, the two main reasons for that, first of all, there's a lot of bullshit you don't really want to be seeing in the chat. Your jungler flaming, your bot lane arguing, all of that stuff, you don't want that to be taking up any space in your mind whatsoever. All you want to be focusing on is getting yourself as strong as possible, playing purely for your own improvement, and playing it more of an individual game. It's solo queue for a reason. Now, of course, the higher elo you go, the more team play becomes important, but even then, you don't really need chat. Pings is going to be enough every time, so don't rely on chat whatsoever. And the second reason, even if your team is not tilted, even if they're making calls and they're trying their best, their calls are not going to be beneficial. For two reasons. One, if they're in the elo bracket below gold, most of the time, their shot calls are probably not going to be correct. But second, if they're making calls for you, even if the calls are good, then you're not going to be learning yourself. You want to be the one making calls and trying to be extremely proactive in the game and trying to make more proactive mistakes. If your jungler pings Baron and you just rock up to it and die, and you go, damn, that was a bad call, you're not taking any accountability. Your improvement is going to be really slowed down than if you're the one making the call yourself. And then all you need to do is pings. You don't need chat for that. But of course, the main reason is there's a lot of negativity in chat that's going to waste up your time. It's going to influence your gameplay, maybe even you chat, can win guys, try to focus. But in my experience, playing hundreds of games with people that play like that, and in the past I was a bit of an in-game, trying to cheer people up myself, 99% of the time, it's not going to work. The only way to cheer up a teammate that's tilted is by winning the League of Legends game. So just play well, just focus on your gameplay, make good plays, start to carry the game, and they're going to start to play more and feel like there's a clear win condition in the game. They're only tilted because they're frustrated. They feel like the game's hard or they're not going to be able to win the game. But if you show them that there's a clear win condition in the game, more often than not, they're going to play better. And even if they don't, you're going to learn more playing that type of style than if you cater to the tilted individuals. Now, those are the two easiest rules to follow. You can just disable chat right now and decide you're not going to leash anymore. But the harder mindset changes to make, the main one is going to be adapt a selfish mentality. You want to be playing for yourself, to make yourself as strong as possible and use that strength to carry the game. You're not going to win very many games by playing for your teammates, trying to get them ahead, trying to snowball them, because they're also in that elo bracket. They're probably not going to be very good at executing with their lead and closing out games, or else they would see more results themselves. So a lot of people I see that I coach, they always make the excuse, oh, if I don't rotate to my jungler here, he's going to tilt, oh, he's going to die, and they get sucked into a bad play. They move when their wave is in a bad spot, or maybe they're about to kill they're in a good spot, and they move to help their jungler, and their lane opponent gets a good base. They're sacrificing their individual advantage, or even creating a disadvantage for themselves, especially if you die or lose a big wave, to help their teammate. You shouldn't have that mindset in the lower elo bracket games. You can win the majority of your games completely by yourself. That's exactly what I did, and I'm not expecting you to be able to do that. Of course, I'm much higher elo bracket than the one I'm playing in, but you should be able to win a good amount of your games by playing purely for yourself as long as you're executing well. If you get really fed in your game, you play the lane quite well, you finish 3-0, you broke tower, and you're continuing to grow that lead and play selfishly, and we're going to be going through how to do that specifically later on, then you're going to have a lot more success later on. Now, the reason I'm tackling the mindset before the actual gameplay aspect is because you can't do that if your mindset is still attached to League being a great team game and having that picture perfect in your mind of 5v5 a dragon fight where everyone does their role. That is not going to happen in the lower elo games. It barely happens in the higher elo games, to be honest, but especially in the lower elo bracket games, it's not going to happen. You're going to win the game. You're going to win or lose the game based purely on your own performance. There are some exceptions, of course, and I'm not expecting you to be able to have a 90% win rate, but you should be able to have a decent win rate if you play purely for yourself and you're executing well and using your lead in a good way. And for our next point, try to simplify the game as best as you can. League is such a complex game, and if you're somebody that watches a lot of high-low content or challenger coaches on YouTube, like myself and others out there, there's so much information that you're taking in, it can make the game way more complicated than it needs to be in these lower elo bracket games. And of course, the main purpose of this guide is to simplify and create that process for you to make it a lot easier. But in terms of your mentality, what you're focusing on in the game is really try to limit that and try to really simplify and break it down and hone on specific aspects of your gameplay. Try to avoid things that are out of your control, what your teammates are doing, how they're performing, what they're saying. Of course, you should have chat off by now, but what your teammates are doing in the game almost doesn't matter in the games that you're going to be playing, so try not to waste too much time and effort thinking about what they're doing and worrying too much about it. You should really try to simplify the game and not worry too much about the more complex aspects of it, how to play around your teammates, set them up for success, high level macro stuff. Really try to simplify it and follow the steps of this guide, and it's going to help you climb a lot more than trying to be a macro master in these lower elo bracket games where macro almost doesn't matter. And the final point, look to play more aggressive and take more risks, especially in the early game. The majority of the students that I've had in this elo bracket that have been there for a long time play the game extremely passive. They leash, they just chill back in lane. If they're not sure how to play a matchup, they just respect, or if they've lost to a matchup before, they respect. That's not how you're going to be learning the game. You want to be pushing yourself. If you're in a matchup where you have no idea how it goes, if you're unfamiliar, push yourself. Fight them level 1, see how it goes, experiment with it, and either make a mistake and learn from it, or figure out that the matchup is going to be in your favor. You want to be pushing yourself in your matchups. Of course, if it's blatantly obvious that you're going to lose, so let's say you're playing Mordekaiser versus Darius level 1, and he fights you and he looks to all in you, it's probably not going to go in your favor. But if that's not actually obvious to you, maybe you haven't versed Darius that much, then figure it out. Go into that lane, Mordekaiser with Ignite, and fight him. See how it goes, and really start to learn these matchups the hard way. You're not going to become good at laning by every time you play a bad matchup or a matchup you're unsure about by just chilling and soaking XP and hoping your team does well or hoping your opponent makes a blatant mistake. Of course, that is a win condition in a lot of matchups, but especially if you're still learning how the matchups go for your champion, you need to be pushing yourself, playing really aggressive, trying to punish him and create yourself a big lead, because that's going to be the best way for you to learn and also the easiest way for you to create big advantages in the game. Moving on to your laning phase and early game in general. Now, something that's very underrated in this elo bracket is abusing your level 1 strength. If you know you're stronger than your opponent, or at the very least similar combat power, you really need to be abusing that fact, which is why I talked about in the mentality section. You need to be figuring that out. if you can be stronger than your opponent or if it's very close, you need to be abusing it. Because a lot of people in this elo bracket, they either leash or they come up late to lane, or they just play very defensive. They just hit creeps, and if you hit them, they'll hit you back. Very, very reactionary based players, this elo bracket, on average. So if you're being very proactive and very aggressive, especially if you know you can win level 1, or if it's very close and you try to outplay them, then the lane is going to be in your favor. You're going to have a lot of momentum, which is why in a lot of the champions I recommend, they have quite a powerful level 1. Champions like Trundle with lethal tempo, champions like Garen, if you take Conqueror and D-Blade, you can actually be quite strong level 1 if you have Ignite as well. So giving yourself a lot of combat power to attack your opponent level 1 is going to start off your lane with a lot of momentum. Now, there are a lot of strategies you can do level 1 and little cheeses to start off with a bit of momentum, but I'll touch on that at the very end. I'll draw on a map and show you some examples, but for now, the main benefit of having a strong level 1, not only will it lead to more kills if they fight you back, or good trades, is you're going to have more control of the wave. If you win your lane from level 1, if you get momentum, if you get a good trade, and they have to respect you because they don't want to walk up to you when your spells are back up and risk dying, then you're going to have full control of the wave, which means if you get push, you are going to be leveling up before them, which is a big point that I see a lot of people missing out on in this elo bracket. The timers in which you're going to be leveling up before your opponent are massive timers for getting kills in lane. If you're about to get level 2 while they're 1, it doesn't matter what champ you are, most of the time you're going to be able to beat them. There might be some exceptions if you're low HP and you took a really bad trade level 1, but still got push. But generally that's not going to be the case. If you get level 1 and you get a good trade against them, even if you're both around similar HP, you should have the advantage on your level. So you need to be really looking to abuse that timer. Don't just get level 2 and then realize, oh, I'm level 2 and walk up to them. Check your XP bar. It's going to be 7 creeps for the first wave. They get level 2, unless you got a ward or a first blood or something like that. But generally, the first creep of the second wave is going to get you level 2. So you need to be ready for that. When that second wave's coming in, you need to be switched up, ready to go, ready to punish that guy. And you can even move towards your target while you're still level 1 to give them as little time to react as possible. If the last creep that'll get you level 2 is about to die to a minion wave, to your creeps taking it down, you can already start to walk towards him. He's going to see your level 1 still, and he might fall into your trap. He might start fighting you, you're going to tick 2, and that's going to lead to a lot of solo kills. That's probably the main way I got kills in this I snowballed, and this elo bracket was using level 1 and 2, and I'm not saying you should be able to do it every time like I did, but it's a skill you need to practice and try to master because there are so many advantages you can be gaining from abusing your level 1 and using that advantage to get level 2 before them. Now, of course, the level 2 timer is not the only one that you can abuse. You can do that on every single level, but level 2 and 3, and of course 6 are the main ones. But level 2 and 3 are the ones I want you to be practicing the most because that's going to be something you can replicate in almost all of your games. Where level 2, first creep of the second wave, you'll get level 2, and level 3, the second creep of the third wave. So the first cannon minion wave that you see, the second creep of that wave will get you level 3, but if that's too confusing, you don't be counting minions or anything like that, you can just look at your XP bar and see when you're 1 creep off, and really start to pre-move. Look to trade onto their head and fight them the second you tick level 2, or level 3, and initiate that trade, or pre-move. Start to walk towards them when you're 1 creep off 3, and that minion is dying to your wave, so that you tick level 3 during the fight. This is a strategy that you can replicate in almost all of your games when you win the level 1, so it's something you should be looking to practice, and something that'll tie into that in terms of wave control is because there are so many complicated wave control strategies, I'd say, that you need to be able to use in high elo brackets. And lower elo, you shouldn't really be trying to make it that confusing, and just focus on crashing wave 3. Really look to limit your wave control to crashing the third wave, because that means you're going to get level 2 when the wave is still high up, you're going to get level 3 when the wave's still high up, and have these 2 massive timers that you can play for kills, where if you accidentally push the second wave, you're just bashing the wave without thinking and crash it too quickly. Then they're going to be able to get level 3 with the wave underneath their tower or just outside of their tower. It's going to be a lot harder for you to play for kills in that type of situation. Now, of course, there are ways around that, but I'd say try not to overcomplicate it. Just play for the third wave crash. Just look to get pushed level 1, abuse your early game power, really get pushed, but get it as a slow push, I would say, so that you tick level 2 before them. Abuse that timer, do the same thing with level 3, abuse that one, and if they were just sitting under their tower fully respecting, then just crash that third wave underneath their tower, and it's got to come back to you and give you windows to punish them later on. And another trick you should be looking to do when you're playing this way, playing really aggressive, bashing them level 1, 2, and 3, is using the bushes to reset minion aggro. Because if you jump onto your opponent and start hitting them, and you're doing that aggressively, more of his minions are going to hit you than your minions are going to hit him, because you're going to be on his side of the lane. So to balance that out, to compensate for that, you need to be utilizing the bushes to reset the aggro. So for example, you queue onto someone's head as Garen, spin through them, and just as your spin is running out, or just before it runs off, you can walk into the bush and all of the minions will start chasing you. Stop chasing you, sorry. Because when you queue onto your opponent's head, all the creeps are going to bash you, but if you walk into the bush even for a second and walk back out, they're going to give up the chase. So really look to use the bushes to reset minion aggro once you're finished with your trade. Because you're not always going to be bashing someone full HP versus full HP to death level 1, of course. Sometimes you're going to be using your main spell, getting a good trade, then resetting the minion aggro and looking to do the same thing again when your spell's back up or just before you tick level 2. Now, before you start to practice this type of playstyle and pushing your limits early game, playing more aggressive, it's important that you go into the game as prepared as possible. And the best preparation you can make is giving yourself as much combat power as you can. Now, if you're somebody that just copies builds, which is very common from high elo players, that's fine. But keep in mind, if you're playing Garen in high elo, there are a lot of matchups or a lot of games where you would take Ghost and Flash together, and you would also take Phase Rush. That's the best scaling option. It has a lot of flexibility in the game, a lot of survivability, but if you're playing Garen in below gold games or even below platinum games, I strongly recommend you take Conqueror in almost every single game. The combat power on this rune is so much higher. It makes your level 1 so much stronger, you can start E and stack it really quickly, and if you win that level 1 trade, then you're going to be getting level 2 before them at level 3, and it's going to open you up to a lot of solo kills. So Conqueror or Lethal Tempo will give you a lot of early game power. I strongly recommend those runes on champs that can use them. So on Trundle, of course, take Lethal Tempo. Even if they remove it later on, you'd still go Conqueror, so same thing. Take a strong level 1 rune that excels in all inning, like Conquest. For example, I don't recommend playing Fiora, but if you were to play Fiora, don't just copy Peyton's rune page of taking Press the Attack. That's very good in high elo in certain matchups, but if you're playing Fiora in low elo, go Conqueror, go Doran's Blade, go Ignite, go a lot of early game power. So pretty much I've narrowed down the 4 horsemen of early game power for lower elo games. You should be taking one of these all-inning runes with Doran's Blade, with Ignite and Bone Plating. Now, of course, don't take this every single game no matter what, but this will give you one of the strongest level 1s possible. If you're playing Garen with Conqueror, D-Blade, Ignite, Bone Plating versus a champ like Set, who also has a good level 1, and he's maybe got D-Shield, or maybe he's got TP Flash, he's missing a lot of this early game power, you're going to be able to beat him in the level 1 trade, and that's going to allow you to get level 2 and 3 before him and look for solo kills. So really start to hone in on practicing using these early game power-ups, I would say, before the game starts. Don't just copy the runes blindly. Think more so about what's going to give you the biggest advantage level 1. Don't take it too far. Don't take Ignite Exhaust, but you actually could. To be honest, you could. And look to abuse that, but it is a pretty bad habit, because even in high elo games, you could take all of these runes and do great in certain matchups, so it's still going to be good for you long term. It's not like a cheesy strategy by any means. I'm just saying in lower elo brackets, having as much early game combat power as possible, 1 to 3, is more valuable, because it's going to be more opportunities for you to get kills. Now, once you start to push yourself early game and play this type of way, there's going to be 3 main outcomes that you're going to find yourself in. Either you're going to die, and what you want to do next is pretty straightforward, just go back to lane and try to recover, or you're going to get a kill, which is great, but keep in mind when you kill them early game, they're either going to TP back straight away or run back very quickly. So once you get a kill, especially if you're low HP, your top priority is getting a recall. Get that wave in as fast as you can and base, or if the wave is coming back towards you, then just base straight away without pushing it. So try to guarantee yourself a recall if you're in a bad state. If you kill your opponent but you're still high HP and you feel like you can still fight them if they come back, that's great, especially if you kill them level 1. You're probably going to get level 2 before they TP back, so you don't need to worry too much unless you're very low HP. So make sure you secure your base as fast as you can after killing them. Don't just hang around in the lane, want to know, 300 HP, and give them an opportunity to come back. Guarantee your base as fast as you can without losing very much CS. Now, the third outcome is you get some good trades, they respect you, and they sit under their tower, low HP, then the wave is going to come back towards you. So don't just keep shoving the wave under tower, wave after wave, guaranteeing through it, because you're not going to be able to really punish them. Allow the wave to come back towards you and sort of bring them out from the tower, lure them away from their safety, and then you can look to punish them later on. Just keep in mind a big timer for when you're getting pushed that they can take, which they're probably not going to in many situations, but it's something you need to keep in mind, is they can get level 4 before you. If the wave is coming back to you, that means they have the minion advantage, which means they're going to get level 4 before you, so that's just a timer you need to be watching out for. However, you can also use that to your advantage on the other end. If you're playing Garen, but you versus Darius, for example, a champion with more early game power than you, and he's getting pushed, and he gets that third wave in, you're going to get level 4 before him. So you can be really ready, studying your XP bar, and just before you tick 4 or as you tick 4, engage onto him, and the trade is going to be most likely in your favor. Now, other than the random B-roll clips I have on the screen right now, I'm going to be going through a couple of examples and talking you through exactly what I'm doing in this game and how I was able to gain a big early game advantage using the concepts we just talked about. For our first matchup, I'm playing Camille into Skarner, and I will note if I was playing this matchup up against a better Skarner player, I would need Darn Shield and second win because this champion has a lot of poke. But because I'm very confident I can punish this guy 1 to 3 and gain myself an advantage, I'm giving myself as much combat power as possible. I'd say almost as much. I'm missing one of the 4 horsemen. I've got Conqueror, Bone Plating, and D-Blade, and I chose not to take Ignite because in this matchup I'm up against a tanky meatball type champ. So when you verse tanks like Ornn and Skarner and Tamkinch, don't feel like you need to take Ignite. You still can, but Ignite Flash is really optimal versus bruises or carry tops to give yourself as much combat power as possible to shut them down. But if you're versus a tanky neutralizer meatball style of champ like this, TP is also going to be fine. Now, the way I play this level 1, I'm looking to cheese him and try. If you're sitting there right now, I'd probably E onto him and bash him down. And if not, I'm just going to ward and, respect if Nocturne chose to come top. So I know I'm going to be playing as aggressive as possible. So now I'm going to be looking to wrap around him, try to get a good trade. I sort of bait him out here. I pretend to go for wave and then loop around and trying to cheese him in this bush. Get behind him and get a good trade. And I chose to start Q because on Camille with Conqueror, you want to be starting Q. So this is what I was talking about before. You don't have to play one of the champs I recommended. I do recommend them, of course, but if you play Camille, avoid starting W and Grasp in a lot of matchups like this. Go Q, Conqueror, Bone Plating, give yourself a lot of power, and you'll see here, even though Camille is not the strongest champ in the game level 1, with Conqueror and D-Blade auto Q, walk into the bush to reset the minion aggro, auto Q again. I've got my Conqueror stacked up to 8 now, resetting not just the minion aggro, but my lane opponent aggro as well, so it's really hard for him to hit me. And now his trade is done. He's done pretty similar damage to me before I got that extra auto just now, and he actually got pretty similar damage to me, but because I took Conqueror and Doran's Blade, and he's got D-Shield and Comet, he's got very short trade pokey runes instead of all in the combat power, it's going to be more so in my favor. And of course my champion is better in an extended fight than his, so that's something you need to start to learn on your own champion. So here I just bash him down, and a pretty easy kill, right? Now, I'm not going to say you can do this every single game, but I'm saying you should be looking for these opportunities. If I just walked into this lane with D-Shield or even D-Blade, but, Grasp and W-Start, there's no way I get this kill. I might still get some good trades, but there's no way I'm going to be playing for this kill. And this is what I want you to be practicing and pushing your limits on, and really trying to posture in a way where you can take it either a great trade or a kill level 1. Now for our next matchup, I'm playing Jax versus Singe, and of course I've got D-Blade and Bone Plating, and I'm looking to play very aggressive level 1, so he actually leaves the try to get back to lane, and now I'm looking to bash him down with my lethal tempo, keep it stacked as much as I can, and even though he has Conqueror, I have to be a little bit wary of that. As you can see, I'm not scared at all of just fighting him. I know I'm stronger than this guy level 1 if the fight goes for long enough, and that's exactly what happened. I'm able to bash this guy down and just beat him to death, all because of my level 1 my processes that we're going to go through after this. I'm going to show you a bit of a checklist that you can look out for. But generally, if you're looking for these plays level 1, even if they go wrong, you're learning a lot more than if I just went into this lane again with D-Shield just last hitting, or just hit him and then ran away when I saw his poison. You need to be pushing your limits and figuring out these types of kills that you can actually gain. So for our final example, I'll show one where I abused the level 2 spike, and in this game I'm playing Camille versus Jace. Now, a big thing that I noticed in Champion Select is this Jace chose to take Phase Rush over Conqueror, which means his early game combat power and all-in power is going to be way lower than mine, which is a big reason why high elo Jaces only go Conqueror versus Camille, but because I know his all-in power is weaker than mine, I'm going to be looking to play extremely aggressive. So I've got Bone Plating, Conqueror, D-Blade, and here initially, I assumed he was in this bush, so I was looking to get behind him, but like I said, a lot of players in this elo bracket just get to lane late for no reason. Maybe they're old tab, maybe that's just what they think's best, but they get back to lane late. So I was able to punish that because especially on champ like Camille, I can utilize the wall there and I'm able to just start E and bash him down, make the lane volatile, already assert my dominance in this lane. And now because it's not a champion I can stick onto, it's range versus melee, I'm back to hitting the wave, looking to get my level 2 before him as fast as I can. And because he's low HP, he's feeling a lot less inclined to bully me. He really doesn't want to be risking and all in against me. He's actually doing okay. He's getting a couple auto attacks in there. But now I know this next minion is going to get me level 2. So I'm already pre-moving onto him. And I could just walk straight onto him and hit him. That would be fine too. But because I'm playing Camille, I'm going to hit this minion myself. Now, if I was playing Trundle or Mordekaiser, I probably wouldn't hit this minion. Especially Trundle. I would run right past it and just start bashing him. And then the creeps would get level 2 for me. But because I'm Camille, I can last hit this minion and skill W, instantly hit the W onto him, and now he's already chunked. Auto attack him down. As you can see here, by my movement, I know this is going to be an all-in, and this is the skill you need to start to develop. You need to start to know, and even if you don't know, if you're unsure, this is the way I'd rather you play. So here, I get a W onto him, auto attack, and I'm already you can see my mouse, I'm already clicking towards his tower. I know I want this guy dead. I know he's dead, I'm clicking through him, and it's going to be harder to see these kills if it's not something you've practiced before, but you need to be playing in this way. So a way that that could indicate for you that's going to work out is if your first trade goes very well, that means it's going to be very likely that you're going to win the all-in. And if you get level 2 while he's level 1, the chance you win is going to be exceptionally high. So those two things in mind here. My first trade went well. I'm getting level 2 before him. It's going to be a very easy kill for me. I even still had my E, so even if he flashed away, I could have followed him. So it was pretty much guaranteed. And I didn't have to play Camille for this one. I could have played a basic champ. You know, it would have worked on Mordekaiser or anything like that if I won that trade and if I got level 2 before him. Not saying the matchup would have went the same way, but it's a skill you can start to develop and start to practice and really make your 1 to 3 as aggressive and punishing as possible. So I'm going to wrap up the laning section with some general guidelines you can follow to help yourself get the best level 1 possible. Now, what I strongly recommend, especially if you're playing in an aggressive matchup, a volatile lane, or a matchup where you want to be punishing, is ward level 1. You should be warding level 1 in almost every single game, but just to try to make it easier for you, just ward every game, and the best location to ward, if you're blue side, is to ward the enemy tri-bush at around 1 minute and 23, and if you're on red side, ward deep in the river at around the same time. Now, these wards are going to be the best generally. It's not going to cover you for every single situation, but it's going to be the best in the long run. So, for example, if you verse a full clear jungler and he's watched how to clear really quickly and he full clears up, you might get punished, or at least in my hot walls, stuff like that. But generally, in the long run, this is going to keep you safe. If you play aggressive on blue side and their jungler started red, he's just going to come top through try most of the time. I'm not saying it's going to keep you safe 100% of the time, of course, but generally having wards in these locations are going to be very consistent for you. Now, if you are stronger than your opponent level 1, don't just drop the warden straight away to the try. Walk into the try first and sit in there and then ward it at the very end. Now, if you feel like your opponent is leashing, that makes it even better, because after they leash, if they come back and you're in the try and you know you're stronger level 1, you've already won your matchup. You're going to get a good trade, you can bash him down on his way back to the lane, and you're starting off the lane with some momentum. But if he's starting in lane or you just feel like he's not leashing, then you want to be looking to get behind your opponent. If you're stronger, it's important not to just walk in with the wave and just fight him head on. You want to be trying to get behind him, try to reach around and get around him. So here, for example, if the enemy top laner walks up like this to hit the wave because he doesn't see you, you can leave from try like this around the back. I'll just use the drawing and try to get behind him and start off your trade where he has to run through you to get back to your tower. That's going to give you the biggest trade possible. And if you're playing a champ with some early game combat power, you know, like a Trundle with lethal tempo, Garen with Conqueror, D-Blade, stuff like that, these are the types of big trades you want to be looking to get, especially level 1. And the second good spot for cheesing on blue is just by sitting in this push level 1. You can even still ward, but you'd ward the try at around 110, 115, and then walk into here and lie in wait. Make sure the minion wave doesn't show you, and look to punish them as they walk in. Now, if you're playing on red side, it is a lot harder, but you do something similar. You can ward here at around 110, and come and try to get behind them level 1 like this, or you can just straight up start in this bush and look to punish them. Now, I do recommend, unless you know you're just outright stronger, to do more so the loop around, because if you face check your opponent and they get the jump onto you into the bush, that's going to be an advantage for them. So if it's a close matchup, more of a skilly where you want to be, where it can go either way, then try to do more of a wraparound, try to get a deep flank onto them, punish them that way. But if it's a matchup where you know you're just stronger than them, so let's say you're playing Darius and you're up against a Scion or a Mundo or something, then you can just look to stun this bush and punish them as they walk in with their wave. And the final general rule that you need to keep in mind is pay attention to when the wave is actually coming in, especially the second and the third wave. You almost never want to be fighting your opponent around here with the entire wave hitting you. You want to allow the wave to come in, settle down, and then look to fight them. Don't just go and hit them as soon as you see them. Let the wave calm down, let it chill, let them start fighting each other, and then look to fight your opponent. Because if you start fighting them here, all the creeps are going to turn onto you straight away. Your waves are going to be completely ruined. Your wave control is going to be really hard to pull off if that's the case, and the trade is going to be a lot worse for you. So not just the first wave, but every single wave that comes in, that's normally the timer. You don't want to be trading when the wave's actually walking in. You need to be giving it time to settle down and start fighting the other minions before you look for these really big extended types of trades. Our next topic is going to be itemization differences in lower elo bracket games. Now, the reason this section is going to be a bit of a short one is because straight up itemization, having the perfect item build every game, is pretty low on the priority list of things we need to change to see more results from climbing out of these lower elo bracket games. As long as your item build is not terrible, you're going to be fine. And the best way to make it not terrible is to just look up, the most common build that high-low players are doing, maybe find a couple one tricks of your role, and really just start to see what they're building and get some inspiration from that. Now, there are some things you can change compared to what a player would build in the high elo games, and we already touched on it in the laning section, but giving yourself a lot of early game combat power is going to be a higher priority for you. So Doran's Blade over Doran's Shield, Conqueror over Grasp or Lethal Tempo over Fleet, depending on your champion, and giving yourself a lot of combat power. Now, there are some exceptions, of course. If you're playing Garen versus Vayne, probably go D-Shield, but even then you could probably get away with D-Blade if you wanted to. But generally, if you can go D-Blade, on these strong early game AD champs and give yourself a lot more early game combat power, or Doran's Ring on a champ like Mordekaiser instead of D Shield, you're going to be seeing more results in terms of your 1 to 3. Now, other than the early game tech, there were some key items that felt significantly stronger in this elo bracket compared to others. And for example, Blade of the Ruin King. If you were to build this item in a high elo game on a champion like Jax, for example, if you were to go Triforce and Bork, your team fighting and skirmishing power is going to be very low. You're going to have no ability haste, you're going to have very low survivability, it's going to be really hard for you to execute that team fight. Where if you were to play that on a lower elo game, for example, where the win condition, it's possible to win through side and further grow that advantage, Bork felt a lot stronger, and we'll touch on exactly how to win through side and stuff like that in the mid game, but in terms of your itemization, items that make you a lot stronger, in terms of your combat power and your side laning ability, are going to feel the best. So Bork is the main one, but there are other items such as the Hydra items, items like Ravenous Hydra, Profane Hydra, even Titanic Hydra to a degree, because that allows you to farm very quickly, to eat camps very well, and especially Ravenous Hydra, as a lot of sustain. You can stay on the lane in the lane for a long time, you can 1v2. These items felt very good, even Hullbreaker as well, gives you a lot of early combat power. So having these types of items are going to feel better than building more for your team, more defensive, more tanky. So for example, if you're playing Garen, and you're playing up against, they have some healer, they have a Soraka or something, don't really feel like you need to be the one that builds healing count. Don't get the mortal reminder and be that guy for your team, where maybe you're up against a Vlad top or something, or a tank like a Gragas. You can build Hullbreaker and really start to try pressure and win through side and win that way. You don't need to be building for survivability, being a frontline, stuff like that for your team, because winning through side is going to be a feasible option. So some more examples of that is on set, where instead of just going Stride Breaker Steerax or Stride Breaker Tank, something like that, go Blade of the Ruin King into melee matchups. Go Bork, and when you're up against a bruiser like Aatrox, just bash him to death. Bork Stride Breaker, your individual power is going to be so much higher than if you go Stride Break, Steerax, Randuins or something like that. Build more so you can dominate the side and win like that, because not only are you going to have more 1v2 power, if you get ganked, you can also eat camps faster, the waves, break the tower. It's going to allow you to snowball way harder in these mid-game type situations. One thing you do need to watch out for though is make sure you're not just tunneling on building these items every game regardless of your champion. You need to find the items that work well on your champ, and you can do that by seeing what all the high-low players are building, all the one tricks, but just checking through OPGG or DeepLol, websites like that. But generally, there are going to be items that are stronger in side laning for your champion. So for example, let's say you're playing Mordekaiser, you're probably not going to be building a Hydra, but maybe you want to be building Nash's Tooth second instead of building Rylai's. Because your lane opponent, maybe you're playing up against a set, the Nash's is going to give you a lot of power in that 1v1. It can allow you to eat camps in the tower quicker, compared to if you bought Rylai's, even though Rylai's might feel better. If you team fought and you had to slow down their Thresh Jigs lane, something like that, you want to be slowing them down and sticking onto them, you don't really need to be playing more so for that. You could be winning through side and creating your advantage that way, so having a lot of side laning power, items like Nash's can feel quite good. Or if you're playing, for another example, Set, don't just default to going Stride Breaker, Steerax, and then like Randuins or Deadman's played every game. Go more so the side lane power build. Go Bork, go Stride Breaker. Give yourself a lot of power. Of course, if you're versing a range top, like a Vayne, go Stride Breaker first. But if you're versing a melee, go Bork first and give yourself a lot of early game combat power and look to shut them down early, look to win side, and snowball your game that way. And I'll touch on exactly how to do that in the mid game section. But in terms of your itemization, just try to prioritize early game combat power and side lane power as well. Next up, we're going to be covering the mid game. Now, the majority of this section is going to be centered around playing champions that excel in side lane, because in my opinion, that is the best way to win these types of games by far. Now, what I strongly recommend, as soon as your lane is over, your top priority is not playing around Dragon, helping your team, stopping your team from getting caught out, but giving yourself as much gold and XP as possible. Playing purely for your individual advantage is going to be the most consistent option long run, because there are so many resources available to you on the map. A lot of people In this elo bracket, they abandon waves, camps, towers. There's so much income for you to take, and if you're playing a champion that excels in taking them, you're going to really be able to snowball. So for example, we're playing blue side, and we just finished our lane, hopefully we won, and we got this tower down. Your top priority now is to eliminate these two tier 2s as fast as you can. These give you an insane influx of gold, and if your opponent is protecting them and not allowing you to, just play for every single wave that comes in, every single camp that you can. Just devour all the camps that you can, even your jungler's camps if he's not playing to that side, and just grow yourself as big as possible. Now, eventually, your opponent's going to make a mistake. He might overstep, he might base at a bad time, he might roam. He's not going to sit here catching you away forever, and if that's the case, you can break the tower. Or even in games when you get a big enough lead, maybe you're playing set and you're 3-0 versus an Aatrox or something like that, you can just ignore his combo and just bash down the tower and really look to stamp your pressure onto the map. Now, playing in this way is not only going to be for yourself. You're going to be gaining a lot of, it's not only going to benefit yourself, I should say. You're going to be gaining a lot of XP and gold, but you're also going to be pressuring the map quite a lot. Every time you're knocking on the door to this tower, it's going to make the enemy team more inclined to respond. So if you can play this type of way, this high income style, without dying to the enemy jungler, team, whatever their teammates they send up to you to kill you, without dying to them, you're going to be able to really impact the game. But the top priority, as soon as your lane is done, or even in your lane, is your individual golden XP. Grow yourself as big as possible, eat all of these resources on the map that people aren't taking, and really try to be a bit of a raid boss at later points of the game. Now, once you've reset stage, once you've got these 2 towers down, you're going to be so accelerated, you can pretty much carry a fight by yourself. Now, you still have to play it well, don't get me wrong, and there is skill to it, but you can really have that choice. So if you're playing a champ like Trundle or Yorick, 2 of the champs I recommended, and you get these 2 towers, maybe you don't look to group. Maybe you still just run it down and you try to end the game like that. I do recommend, once both the towers are down, just to go to the opposite side of the next objective, so mainly around Baron. So if Baron is up, just go run through bot, or if they're playing for Dragon, you can run through top. Either is fine, but generally you're trying to create as much pressure as possible and accelerate yourself as hard as you can. Now, something I do want to clear up, I'm not saying you should literally never look for fights no matter what. What I'm saying is use these sides to make yourself as big as possible as your top priority. All of these camps, all of this gold for you to take should be your top priority. The times you do want to be looking to fight are either going to be when your opponent is under tower and you can't make any progress against him and there's no camps to eat, then you can be looking for a fight. Or even if there are camps to eat, if there's free kills mid, of course you can look. But generally, if you're not making any progress inside, that's going to be more of an indicator. You can look for a fight. But if you are progressing, you're getting all these camps, you're getting some damage to tower, chunking him under tower, stuff like that. Keep going through side. That is going to be your clear win condition because he cannot hold you by himself. He has to send multiple teammates to deal with you, which means you're drawing so much pressure while getting fed at the same time. And what often ends up happening is if you try to min-max and hit that perfect middle ground between side laning and being around your team, where in lower elo brackets it's going to be almost impossible to do, you're going to be wasting a lot of time. You're going to be floating around hoping to save your team. Maybe your AD carry dies, you save support, maybe you even get 1 kill, and then the enemy top laner pushes the wave all the way to here, and now he's the one pressuring. So it's better for you to maintain pressure, just eat all the camps and farm that you can, prioritize that over everything, and if you're not making any progress, then you can join your team. The other exception to that is, of course, if a major objective is up, and a major objective is Baron, Dragon Soul, or Elder Dragon, of course then, maybe you want to be looking to be a part of that, but that's very late into the game. By the time it gets to that point, you should already be very accelerated for playing maximum selfish gameplay. Now, there's one more benefit to this type of gameplay that I haven't really touched on yet, and that's the amount you're going to be gaining from the game. Now, I don't mean LP, that'd be pretty nice, but the amount of learning you're going to be taking from the game. Let's say there's 2 scenarios, where both scenarios you win your lane, you're 2-0 or 3-1, something like that, you break the tower, and you feel like every time I don't group, every time I'm pushing, my team's just getting caught. I need to save them. You group up with your team, you're around Dragon or around mid, and there's just a lot of fighting. It's 1-for-1, 2-for-2, stuff like that. And you are saving your team from getting caught to a degree. If you went there, maybe more of them would have died, but you're just getting sucked into the chaos. Maybe you get a kill here, but then the enemy top pushes on top, you have to go answer, your team gets caught again while you're gone. If you played this type of gameplay, and I've seen it so many times, you're going to have around a 50% win rate. Maybe slightly higher, maybe slightly lower, but you're playing around your team so heavily that the result is not really going to be very high in your control. Where if you play purely for yourself and get a huge lead, you blow up the towers, you get lots of camps, you get a 3-level lead over your opponent. If you're getting that strong in the game and you're not carrying or being the difference maker in the game, then there's so much for you to learn. You can review why exactly that happened, and most likely it's going to be you played too aggressive at the bad time, you died inside, you gave a big shutdown, and then while you're dead, the enemy got Baron or a big dragon or something like that. These mistakes are purely on you. There's nothing your team could do to prevent you doing that mistake, so you need to really see yourself as the problem in that game, even though it might feel like it's your team's fault because you're 4-0 and your bot lane is 0-8, it's actually your mistake for not carrying that game and being the difference maker, because you have way more room in that game to carry and be impactful than your 0-3, 0-4 bot lane. There's not much they can do from that point other than farm, and yes, in an ideal world they would not get caught and go from 0-4 to 0-8 and getting caught constantly, but that's not really going to happen. More often than not, it's better for you to focus on what's in your control, get as strong as possible, and be the difference maker in the game. Be more impactful than the enemy bot lane. Be the difference maker compared to them and close out the game. And if you're not doing that when you're playing this type of gameplay and making yourself really strong, you're most likely making big mistakes that are going to be very apparent in the game, and we'll cover that in the review, how exactly to review your game and learn from that. And I'm also going to show an example after this section of me playing this type of gameplay, and hopefully that can open your eyes a little bit to it. But generally, if you're doing this type of gameplay, the accountability is going to be purely on you, and there will be almost no room for you to blame your team without being a bit delusional. Now, for our final point before I move on to a gameplay example, is if you don't play champions that excel in side laning. So I'll be straight up, if you don't play any strong side laning champions, your journey is going to be harder, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. It just means you have to rely on your team to a degree, so the outcome of the game is going to be less in your control. You can still have a good win rate and still carry a lot of games on these champions, don't get me wrong, but the win condition is going to be a bit harder for you. But the way you want to be winning on these champions. So let's imagine your pool from the champs we listed before. You picked Malphite and Wukong. So very weak side lane champions. Even Wukong's not the strongest, he doesn't have very much sustain, but these champions are very good in team fights and skirmish situations. Now, the way you want to be playing the mid game on those champions is pretty much the opposite to the ones we just talked about for side laning. You want to be eliminating side lane and grouping up with your team and looking for plays around your ulti. So let's say we're playing Malphite, our ulti's up. We get rid of the wave. You don't have to push it all the way to here. It depends on the game. But just push out your wave and then look for a play around mid. The three most common locations for a team fight are around mid, dragon, and baron. So those are the three that you're going to be looking. So you want to be removing a side wave and then looking for a play. If there's no play, just go back, farm again, and keep going. And when your ulti is on cooldown, then you really want to be looking to return to side and just farm it out as much as you can. You can eat camps, especially if you build Hydra on Wukong, and Malphite can eat camps to a degree, that's fine. But generally, you want to just be, every time you have an ulti up, you want to be looking to make a play around mid, baron, or dragon. So I have an example here of me playing the mid game the exact way we just talked about, where I'm just eating all the camps and the farm and the towers that I can on the map, and making myself as strong as possible, and I don't care what my team is doing whatsoever. I'm not looking to group, I'm just looking to accelerate. Now the context for this game, I'm 3-1, I do have pretty good CS, don't get me wrong, but 3-1 just won my matchup. This is a pretty realistic advantage, I'd say. Maybe it'd be a bit less on farm, or maybe you'd break your tower a lot later, but generally this is realistic if you play your lane quite well, and this is how I use my lead. So I go straight back top out of base, I push the wave as fast as I can, one-shot the wave, so I'll speed up a little bit, as there's not that much to break down. I'm just playing purely for farm and XP. Everything I see, I take, and like we talked about, your opponent is often going to be late getting back to lane. And now, since he just did that, he's back to lane, and I was able to break this tower. So I jump onto him, play for the kill, have to use my flash, but we're able to kill that guy as well because I won my lane from playing aggressive early, and I'm able to punish him inside if he disrespects. So now I get the kill, get the tower, straight into red buff, eating all the camps and farm that I can, and straight back to top. Generally, you want to do one camp into wave, into one camp into wave. That's a pretty good pattern to fall into to maximize your farm. And after this wave, I was originally just going to Raptors, but I saw a free kill here, so I took it. And then there's just tower plates, so I might as well, right? All I care about is gold, and it doesn't really matter where it's from. I'm just looking to take whatever I can. So stay here, break the tower plates just to accelerate myself, and then I'm going to be looking to base and buy my item. And I prioritize Bork, like we talked about in the itemization section. That Singe is annoying, like we talked about, and now I was able to, so I'll speed up a little bit. It's pretty disrespectful of me. I should have based better, but now I was able to get my Bork and accelerate my side lane power. So I TP straight back to side. I'm not walking back to side thinking, oh, I need to hold my TP. What if my team gets caught out? I need a TP in. Nothing like that. Straight back to side. I know this is my win condition. So I kill their jungler, jungle Yorick. That's how you know we're in a low elo bracket game. Jungle matchup Malphite vs Yorick. kill this guy too. And yeah, I'm not going to show this example for much longer, but as you can see, I'm extremely accelerated, even though I just finished lane 3 and 1. Look how much stronger I've became in just 4 minutes, because I purely played for golden XP. I took all the resources I can that presented themselves to me in the game, and now I'm at a point where I'm pretty much unbeatable. It doesn't matter how many people they send to me. Of course, if they send 4 or 5, I'm probably going to respect quite heavily, but I can generally, 1v2 like this, and this is the amount of pressure you want to be happy to create. If you're in this situation where you have 2 people against you, you are doing it very well for the game. The rest of the team has to play as if it's a 4v3, and you're the one pressuring. It's not even a 4v3 where you're getting pressured, it's a 4v3 where you're pressuring two of the enemy champions, and the rest of your team can play. But I'm not saying they're going to use that advantage well. As you saw, my Yasuo just died. It's going to be, you're still going to run into situations like that, but the amount of pressure you're creating is going to lead to good outcomes more often than not. And even if your team still underperforms, like my Lux just died too, if you get strong enough, you can generally change the outcome of the game yourself. So even if I didn't kill these guys here too, just traded 1 kill and survived the gank, it would have been really good. Next up, we're going to be covering the review process. Now, there can be a lot that goes into a review, especially in high elo brackets, but what I strongly recommend for below gold games is keep your review as simple as possible. Focus on 3 main things, and you probably got a theme of the video by now, what I want you to be focusing on, but the first one, the top priority, is going to be your early lane phase. Really break down your levels 1 to 3, how you could have played them better, could you have played more aggressive? If you did play aggressive and you messed it up, how you could have been playing it better? If the matchup's just hard, really break it down and really pre-plan how you're going to play that matchup better to gain a bigger advantage in the future. Now, I did note on the screen here that I said the first 6 minutes instead of just 1 to 3, and that really depends on your champion and matchup. If you're playing Garen versus Darius, of course you can play your 1 to 3 a lot better, and you can kill that guy in a lot of matchups, but if he's playing well, he's going to get pushed in that lane, and your time to strike is going to come later on. Or if you're playing champs like Mordekaiser, champs like Wukong, champs like Malphite that spike at level 6 where they get their ulti, then the first 6 minutes is going to be more important. You generally get your ulti on either the 5-minute wave or the 5:30, and that's the timer where you're probably going to be looking to kill if you're playing champs like that. So the first 1 to 3 levels is the top priority, but on some champs or matchups it can be the first 6 minutes. After your early game, the next point you're going to be reviewing is going to be your deaths. Skip to every single death. Don't just watch the death and think about, oh, could I have mechanics maxes and outplayed it. Go to around 30 to 60 seconds before the death and break down what you missed. Did you miss a jungler crossing through mid? Should you have placed a ward before you bash that tower? And really think about how you can prevent that death from happening in the future. Because if you play this high income style, not only are you going to have more shutdowns, but your death is going to be more impactful as well, because the times you're dead are going to be times where you're not farming, not getting the XP, and not pressuring the map. And your final point to review, and this one can be optional, but a situation in the game that makes you feel very emotional, because all of us playing this game, we're all human, even your junglers, they're human too, so we're going to be feeling frustrated about certain situations of the game. When you make a mistake, you're going to feel a certain way about it. So if you feel very strongly about something that happened in the game, then you can skip to that play after your review and see what happened and break it down. However, it's important to note, if you feel like, oh, I one-shot the AD carry in a team fight, but we still lost, why'd that happen? And you're watching the game back and seeing what your teammates did, complete waste of time. You should only be watching your character and see what you did. Maybe you missed some information. Maybe after killing the AD carry, you could have disengaged, or maybe you should have left them on 1 HP, not flashed after him and helped your team. If you review like that, a mistake that you made, that's going to be fine. Just make sure it doesn't spread to the rest of the team. And even if you do feel emotional from something your teammates did, of course you don't really need to review that. Just focus purely on the early game or your deaths. We're going to finish up this guide with the main takeaways, but I'm going to be structuring it more so like a checklist. So step 1, select your champions, and I recommend between 1 to 2, and if you can pick from that list that we recommended before, the high ease of execution champions, that's going to be great, but also trying to play one that excels in side laning. Because winning through side lane is going to be a clear win condition for you, and it's a great skill to learn and give you more accountability for the game. Now step 2, turn off your chat completely. For every 100 games you play, there might be 1 or 2 games where chat was kind of productive and not that toxic, but it's not worth the downside of all of those other games where it's very negative and it distracts you and makes you make plays based on emotional decisions. Now step 3, the first 5 minutes of the game, between 5 to 6 minutes, is the most important in the majority of your games. Look to gain the biggest advantage that you can from that point and use that advantage to, keep growing your own advantage and get as strong as possible, which ties into check 4. After your lane, and hopefully by that point, if you've been focusing on that skill, you're already accelerated, use your strength to keep growing your lead, to destroy camps, towers, enemy champions, just grow the biggest lead that you can, and use that lead to carry the game. And the way you carry the game is going to be different every time. You might use your big lead to carry a team fight, be the difference maker in that fight. You might keep going down side 1v2, dive your opponent under tower, break the inhib, make them base, and let your team get Baron. Stuff like that. It's always going to depend on the champion that you're playing, which is another reason why your pool is going to be so small. You can really start to figure out the clear win conditions for the champions you're playing and try to execute them consistently. Now keep in mind a big benefit to the majority of these points is your impact in the game is going to be significantly higher. Now that's not always going to be a good thing. Maybe your negative impact is going to be higher because you're playing a lot more aggressive than you're used to and you're getting punished for it, but that's the only way you're going to grow. You're not going to improve at the game by sitting back in lane and chilling, listening to your jungler call when he wants to fight crab, floating around your team so they don't get caught out. You're not going to improve that way. You're only going to improve by being very proactive, trying to get big leads by yourself, trying to grow your strength even further, trying to push, maybe I can get that tower, maybe I can't, and learning from it. That's the best way for you to grow, and also that's the best way for you to carry games and be the difference maker between the win or the loss. Alright everyone, I'm going to wrap it up there, and I hope this video helped provide some value for you, because I don't really see myself needing to play in these lower elo brackets again. This was my first time needing to rank up a Korean account. Usually I use Riot ones, but now that I've got it ranked up, I won't really be doing it again. But I will say my experience was quite valuable. It's helped me a lot with coaching my lower elo bracket students. It's helped me understand them a lot more. And of course, it helped me create this guide. So hopefully it did provide some value for you and helps you on your rank journey. Now, as usual, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to ask down below. My next video is going to be mainly centered around going from Emerald to Diamond. So look forward to that. But other than that, I'll see you guys next time.